Hello, students. Today we are going to see the third chapter of your history textbook. The chapter's name is The Delhi Sultanate during the time 1206 to 1526 CE. And this video is in two parts. This chapter is in two parts in order to keep the video short. So, this is the first part of it. Please be sure to watch the second part also. I am your Sam, sir. Uh, this period is also known as a later medieval period, and we are going to see the five dynasties which ruled during this period. The dynasties are the Slave dynasty, the Khilji dynasty, the Tughlaq dynasty, the Sayyid dynasty, and the Lodi dynasty. And during all these five dynasties, Delhi remained an important city. Now, this is the list of the main rulers of each dynasty. These were from the slave dynasty. These were from the Khilji dynasty. These are from the Tughlaq dynasty. And these are from the Sayyid dynasty. And finally, three rulers from the Lodi dynasty. Now, there is no lack of sources for the history of the Delhi Sultanate. We have inscriptions, we have monuments, we have coins. They provide a lot of information to us about the history of those times. And the Turco Arabs had a tradition of recording events, and they made court chronicles. This is how it looked. These are the coins. This is the inscription. This is on the Qutub Minar, and as a monument itself, we have the Qutub Minar. We have also the travelogues of people like Ziauddin Barani, Shams-e-Siraj, Afif, Minhaj-e-Siraj, Ibn Battuta, and Marco Polo. We also have the Persian records or histories. Tariq is singular and Tawarik is plural. This is Ibn Battuta on the left. Then we have Barani in the center. We have Marco Polo. And on the right hand side, we have the Tawarik. Now let's learn about the slave dynasty. The word Mamluk in Arabic means owned. That is, somebody has paid price for them and have owned them. So these were slaves who were purchased in the market. Now these sultans were slaves, but they rose to power and position because they had certain abilities. They were intelligent and hardworking. Many sultans, or these slave sultans or Mamluk sultans, were highly educated, and they were experts in war tactics, and they knew how to control armies and court politics and about the strategies of war. They had all the qualities that is required in a sultan. Now I want to tell you one thing. In our country, we consider the prince or Rajkumar to be having less power than the king. But in the Arabic countries, the Sultan has got more power and more respect and more area to rule than a king. Qutbuddin Aibak was a Mamluk or the slave of Muhammad Ghori. Now, you read about Muhammad Ghori and Muhammad Ghazni in your previous chapter, and you also uh, know a part of that history. And when Muhammad Ghori left India, he defeated Prithviraj Chauhan in the second battle of Tarain, and left India. And while he was returning, he had a slave known as Qutbuddin Aibak, and he handed over the responsibility to Qutbuddin. And this Qutbuddin Aibak, in the year 1206, he founded the slave dynasty. Qutbuddin Aibak was a slave of Muhammad Ghori. Now, when Ghori was killed on his way back, he was returning not to his home, but he was returning to Ghazni. But on his way back to his home country, that is Afghanistan, he was assassinated. And when this happened, Qutbuddin established his control and marched into Delhi. And Qutbuddin made Kila Rai Pithoda his home after capturing Delhi. And he was a very kind-hearted man. He was a kind-hearted man. He got the title of Lakh Baksh because he donated generously to charity. This is Qutbuddin Aibak on the left, and this is the place from where he ruled, Killa Rai Pithoda. Another slave ruler was known as Shamsuddin Iltutmish. He crushed revolts, protected and strengthened boundaries, established a strong and consolidated sultanate. The sultanate means the kingdom of the sultans. And he completed the task of Qutbuddin Aibak. So he is regarded as the actual founder of Delhi Sultanate because he knew the vision of Qutbuddin Aibak. And although Qutbuddin couldn't do it, Shamsuddin Iltutmish did what was required to be done. Later on, he had the expansionist attitude also. That means capturing other areas and uh, bringing them into his own subjection, expanding his kingdom. So he fought against Rajputs at Gwalior, Bayana, Jalore, Ranthambore, and Ujjain, and he could add Gwalior and Bayana to his kingdom. Iltutmish made his daughter Razia Sultan as the next ruler of Delhi Sultanate because although he had a son known as Ruknuddin Firoz Shah, but this son did not have the qualities of becoming a king because he was very careless, he was fun loving, he did not pay attention to the matters of the Sultanate, and he was also neglecting the administration part. So he felt that his daughter Razia Sultan would make a better ruler for his Sultanate. So this is Razia Sultan. She was a great monarch. She was wise and just. She was very generous, and she knew how to dispense justice. She knew how to lead armies, and she could very well protect her subjects. She had all the qualities of a good sultan, but only problem was she was born of a wrong gender. That is what the history says about her. If she had been a man, she would have been accepted by the nobles because the nobles did not this idea was very difficult for them to digest that a woman would rule over them in a such society such as in those days. So all her virtues were worthless in the estimation of men. She was a dynamic ruler and progressive thinker, and she discarded the female attire and put on coat and cap and rode elephants, led armies, went hunting, whatnot. Whatever a male sultan could do, she did it better. She successfully established law and order in the country. And the problem was because she was not liked by the nobles. Her reign was short and full of problems. They created a lot of problems for her. They hated her because they wanted power in their own hands. The 40 nobles, all the Chahalgani, could not tolerate a woman's rule, so they conspired. Finally, they killed her in a battle just outside Delhi, but she died like a brave soldier. This is the grave where she is laid to rest in Turkman Gate in Delhi. This is her grave. Now, the period from 1240 to 1266, that is, these 26 years, was a period of political disturbance, and Razia Sultan's death created fresh problems. Many kings came to the throne. Another son of Iltutmish, Nasruddin Mahmud, he ruled from 1246 to 1266 with the support of the nobles, but he was just like a puppet. Whatever the nobles said, he did. He didn't. He was not a proactive ruler. He didn't contribute anything from his own side. And during his reign, there was a man known as Balban. He controlled the administration, and despite the opposition from the nobles, he still managed to hold on to the administration. He was Ghiyasuddin Balban. Let's learn about him. He was a able nobleman. He was proved to be the most powerful ruler of the slave dynasty. He reorganized and strengthened the armies. He led many campaigns against the local rulers and defeated them. He was also successful in guarding the northwest border against Mongol raids. He wanted to be regarded in high esteem, so he introduced some customs of the Persians, such as Sijda, Paibos, and Zaminbos. Sijda means to bow down, as in when somebody is uh, reading the namaz, the way they bow down, they kneel down first and they bow their head, forehead to the ground. That is known as sijda. And paibos is to kiss the feet of the king, of the sultan. And zamin bows means to lay on one's face fully flat and kiss the ground in front of the sultan. Now, he was criticized for introducing these customs because these were reserved for God. Now, he wanted to be treated with equal respect to that of God. That is the reason why the people were opposing these customs. By the time of his death, the Turkish rule was firmly established in Delhi and Ganga, Yamuna, Doab. Doab means the land between the two rivers, and also in eastern Rajasthan. But the problem was the people, his successors, were very weak rulers. In this painting, we can see Paibos. This man is kissing the feet of the Sultan. Now, one needs certain qualities to become a Sultan. Let us see what are these. This Sultan should be necessarily a strong military general. He should be ambitious and he should have expansionist policies. I already told you what is the meaning of expansionist policies. He should have the policy that he will capture the neighboring kingdoms, defeat the kings, and include those kingdoms in his kingdom to make his kingdom larger. That is expansionist policy. He should be well versed in warfare skills and military designs. He should be a strong person and also has support of nobles, military, and the ulema. Ulemas means they are a religious sect of Islam, and they have a lot of say and lot of respect because of their religious background. Now, Razia Sultan was killed, but Balban controlled these factors. Whatever factors in which Razia Sultan was weak, he controlled those factors and rose to power. Now, what is the role of an army during his time? During the period of unrest and public uproar, the army controlled the people and crushed the rebellions. Today also, we have the police to control the people and crush rebellions when they come out. But in case they are not able to handle it, the government calls the army to do that. Similarly, it was in their days. Now, the army checked the invasions and attacks. People who wanted to attack their kingdom or invade their kingdom, the army controlled those people and they did not allow them to enter. Jalaluddin, an army officer, founded a new dynasty after Balban. And Tariq-e-Firoz Shahi, the meaning is the history of Firoz Shah. Please note that Firoz Shah can be written with U as well as O. This is the work of an historian known as Ziauddin Barani that gives a detailed description of Jalaluddin and the rulers who followed him. Now let's learn about the Khilji dynasty. The Khilji sultans ruled for 3 decades and they followed very ambitious expansionist policies. They were very good administrators. They consolidated the huge empire. They expanded the field of economics and market control policies. They were very well known for this. Now we'll see about that in a while. Now the first Khilji ruler was Jalaluddin Firoz Khilji. He was not a very strong ruler, but he was very tolerant and avoided giving harsh punishments. He was lenient towards the Mongols. Now, later, these Mongols became a headache for India. He married the daughter of a Mongol leader known as Ulugh Khan. The nobles enjoyed a powerful role during his reign, but they conspired against him and killed him, and his he had a nephew named as Ali Gurshap. He succeeded Jalaluddin Firoz Khilji, and this nephew was given the title of Alauddin. So he was known as Alauddin Khilji. Now let's learn about Alauddin Khilji. He was a he was the most powerful ruler of the Khilji dynasty. He was the first Turkish Sultan to build an imperial empire in India. He extended the boundaries of Delhi Sultanate beyond the Vindhyas and went up to the Deccan. He was a brilliant general and capable administrator, although he was illiterate. Yet he was a patron of art and literature, and he used to have poets and writers in his court. Amir Khusro and Sheikh Ruknuddin were poets in his court. Alauddin Khilji planned and executed the expansionist designs in a way that he stood to gain strategically and economically. So whenever he was expanding his kingdom, he was doing it in a planned way. He had the strategies that if I annex this kingdom, what will I get? What will be by what? In which way will I profit? Either strategically, maybe from there he could win some other kingdom, or economically, that is, if I uh, 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 subdue this kingdom, what monetary benefits will I and my country get? I and my kingdom get? That was his way of working. He conquered Gujarat and Malwa, and this gave him control of the western seaports. He conquered Ranthambore, Chittor, and Jalore, and the forts of the Rajputs. Then he did not stop at that. He kept on conquering one area after another, and he conquered Deccan. And he was the first Sultan of the Sultanate to do so. Now he had a general named Malik Kafur, and this Malik Kafur was a slave. He was captured from Gujarat. He was they paid some money for him and brought him from Gujarat. They purchased him. This Malik Kafur was also known as Hazar Dinari because they paid 1,000 dinars to purchase him. Now, this Malik Kafur defeated the Yadavas of Devagiri and Kakatiyas of Warangal. You learnt about these two dynasties in the previous chapters. He also defeated the Hoysalas and the Pandyas. About this also you know from your previous chapter. Then he carried a lot of booty from the vanquished kingdoms. Vanquished kingdoms means the kingdoms over which he got the victory. And booty means the loot. So now this Alauddin Khilji had a palace, and he had a palace in Siri Fort, and that palace had a big hall, and this big hall was known for its 1,000 pillars. These pillars were made up of wood, and the roof was also made up of wood. So these pillars could support the weight of the roof. Now, this hall with 1,000 pillars was known as Hazar Uslum. Now, Alauddin Khilji welcomed Kafur to that hall. And this Kafur, when he returned from his campaign in the Deccan, he returned with 612 elephants. Can you imagine bringing 612 elephants and also 20,000 horses and a large amount of gold and jewels? Yet, whichever kings he defeated, they did not kill them. The defeated kings were allowed to continue as rulers in their own land. Only thing is, they said that you had to pay tribute or taxes to Alauddin, and those people they accepted that because they were spared alive. The extent of his kingdom could be compared to that of King Ashoka. The extent of kingdom of Alauddin Khilji was huge, like it was full of modern day India as well as Pakistan as well as Afghanistan and some parts of Burma. Uh, it was huge, it was vast. Now, the reforms in the army. Aladdin had a well equipped, trained, and disciplined army, and he had a vigilance cell to keep a watch on their activities because uh, revolts in army are common, and even conspiracies are first worked out in the army. So he kept a vigilance cell to find out who could do that. He had more than 4,75,000 horsemen, and he used to give a salary of 234 tankas, that was the currency of his kingdom. Tankas, 234 tankas to every soldier in his army. But the soldiers who brought two horses from their own side were given 78 tankas extra, because that is the reason he had a large number of horsemen and horses. And naturally, for these soldiers also, their horses were now looked after in the king's uh, uh, expenses. So it was beneficial for them. Alauddin paid handsome and regular salaries to his soldiers, and they were given training also. They had good arms and weapons, and he introduced a system of branding a horse. That was, he called it as dag, so that nobody could cheat him. Dag means they used to heat a piece of iron and uh, press it to the skin of the horse, so that emblem became permanent feature on the animal's skin. A full description of each soldier was maintained. It was a full record kept of each and every soldier, and this record was called as Chehra. Now we'll read about the economic measures of Alauddin. There were Mongol invasions. Mongolia is a country north of China, as you know, and they were very good at invasions, and they were ruthless. They were merciless people. Now, Mongol invasions and internal revolts increased the cost of maintaining a large army, because they feared that the Mongols would invade. So they had to keep armies in that area, in the borders, and there were a lot of revolts inside the country, and this increased the cost of the army. But his concern was to still keep his soldiers living well and survive well. And he ordered to measure all the land under the cultivation, and he started a land revenue system. That is, he called it kharaj, and this was fixed according to the fertility of the soil. This was a good measure, but taken at the wrong time. The measure is like this: if you are a farmer and you have a very fertile land, then you pay more tax. And a farmer who's not having a very fertile land, he will pay less tax. It was very just and a good measure of collecting land revenue. He increased the taxes on the farmers of the Doab. Doab is Do is two and Ab is river. So the land between river Ganga and river Yamuna is known as Doab, and it was a very fertile land. So because this land was fertile, the taxes on the farmers of this region increased. But the nobles did not put other taxes on the farmers. So this man, Alauddin Khilji, was keeping a watch on the nobles also. Are they taxing the farmers twice? Then he began the audit of the accounts of the officers. What his officers were earning, what are they spending it on? He wanted to know everything. And in addition, he fixed the prices of food articles and enforced them rigorously. Nobody could buy or sell anything in the market at a price other than that given by the Sultan. He built granaries in Delhi. Here, the grains were stored and sold at retail prices. In his market control policy, everything from groceries to vegetable, horses, slaves, everything had a fixed price. He introduced subsidized rationing system, especially during the time of scarcity. Just like we have the PDS, the public distribution system, or the ration card, we say the ration store. He had a similar system. Even the quantity of food grain one could purchase was fixed. That means nobody could buy a lot of food grain and keep it hoarded in his house. For example, nobody could buy more than half amount, that is 14 pounds. 14 pounds equal to roughly 7 kgs of corn at a time. That 7 kgs of corn was sufficient for a small family, and Next time, whenever that person wanted, they could always go and buy more. And this is the reason nobody could hoard grain, and this helped in difficult times. The head of the department of granary was known as Shahana-e-Mandi. He would prepare a list of prices of various commodities, and he would also register merchants who would buy and who would sell, and he would keep an activity on their activities, eye on their activities. Are they selling at fair price? Are they cheating in weights and measures? The Shahana-e-Mandi looked after the royal granary. He supervised the markets, kept a constant vigilance on weights and measures, and punishment were severe when they found there were traders who were not keeping the law. Thus, Alauddin was also an efficient administrator. After his death, Khusro Malik was the last Khilji ruler, and Ghiyasuddin defeated him and started the Tughlaq dynasty. This is the grave of Alauddin Khilji. This is also the end of the first part of this chapter. Wait for the second part, it's going to come shortly. And if you have gained from this video, give it a thumbs up. See you soon.